This is your host Alicia, and you're listening to
the Musicians Help Desk podcast, brought to you by the Music District.
Say you'll be there. Say you'll be there for me, and I swear I'll follow suit.
So it's been long romanticized, this notion that mental illness fuels brilliant art. But in the past couple years in the music community, with the heavily publicized and tragic deaths of artists like Scott Hutchinson of Frightened Rabbit and Mac Miller, more artists are speaking openly about their own struggles with depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. This is not only to break the cultural stigma of mental illness, but to reach other musicians struggling in isolation, and to let them know they're not alone. On this podcast, we're going to hear from guest Spencer Townshend Hughes about the purpose, origin, and impact of the Denver Musicians Mental Wellness Meetup. And we'll learn about its recent integration into the Fort Collins community. Without further ado, we'll listen to a bit more of Spencer's band, The Hollow, and drop into a conversation I had with him at the help desk in the Red Room of the Music District in March of 2019. So today, we're going on our first journey with the Musicians Health Desk.
Ooh, I like it.
Do you see what I did with that?
That was so good.
Okay, and today I'm hanging out with Spencer Townshend Hughes, frontman, rhythm guitarist of Denver alternative and rock band The Hollow. And really excited to have you here today, Spencer. We've been talking about doing this for a long time.
Ages.
So welcome to the Red Room of the Music District.
It feels so good.
You look good.
Thank you. Feel good.
I mean, I feel like it's an appropriate time to have this conversation about mental wellness because I've got a bad case of the Februaries, even though we are well into March at this point.
Yeah.
I feel like the sunshine has just been like refusing
I know.
to show its face. So.
It's like we just have to enjoy the time that we have with it. You know what I mean? Because it's really easy to look at future forecasts too and say like, oh, there's going to be snow and gray, like, which means that we're not appreciating the sun that we have today. So it's like, let's just try to do that.
Let's do it.
Right?
I'm enjoying it, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yes. So tell me what you're up to in town. I know you're based out of Denver, but we get to see your face fairly often here at the Music District, which is great.
That's something that's really important to me. I love this community so much. I'm trying to come up here at least like twice a month just to get to see friends and make new friends and chat community and chat music and do all of those cool things. I think that it's really important to kind of build the bridge between Denver and Fort Collins communities, starting with like the art and music community, which is the task that we're kind of taking on ourselves. But I found myself like just coming up here to play music, and then once I'm done playing music, I just leave, and then it's like, okay, well, see you later. And so for me, I'm fortunate that I have Mondays off, so I get to come up and hang out and, you know, take a tour of the Music District and see all of my friends that work here, and also connect with some of my friends that live up in this area. So it's been a lot of meeting and sharing about what we're doing with the Mental Wellness Meetup and the group that we started down in Denver, and starting to build those friendships and relationships and partnerships with people up here who are looking to kind of do the same thing that we're getting into. So yeah, it's been a fun weekend just catching up with folks. It's good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're here to talk a little bit about that wellness meetup and how that started.
Yeah.
And do you want to just dive into a little history first?
Sure. Yeah, I would love that. So it was, I guess it was last January, I think, where I had kind of reached my max. This whole entire meetup spawned from necessity of the services and resources provided by what is now the Mental Wellness Meetup. On Facebook, there's a Denver music scene kind of group page where all these musicians and promoters and booking talent, like talent buyers, all of these people just kind of convene on this page and ask for like resources and like, oh, hey, so we're trying to book a tour. Do you guys know anybody in Omaha or whatever? And it's a great, valuable page for local musicians to go on and chat. But I had reached kind of my maximum mental capacity as far as my mental unwellness and how it was directly correlated with being involved in the music scene. And so I had outreached that community and said, hey, do we have anything like this where we can just talk to people about how this scene like drives us crazy and like the anxiety and depression that comes from being in the music scene? And the overwhelming response was, no, we don't have that, but you should totally start that. And I was like, okay, well, not the answer I was looking for, but sure, like, I guess we can look into that. So Jonathan Bray, who plays guitar in The Hollow and sings as well, and Angela Whaley, our manager, the three of us kind of co-founded this Mental Wellness Meetup. And so we've been hosting it since February of last year. And essentially it is a support group for musicians and people involved in the music community who want to get together and like just talk about their frustrations or the things that are causing them anxiety, you know, things that they feel depressed about and how it's tethered to the music community. And yeah, I mean, for myself, I had started this out of necessity. I needed somebody else other than Jonathan and Angela to talk to because I felt like I've exhausted their ears with my complaints. Mm-hmm. But just to talk about like, hey, so we spend thousands of dollars on recording music and we don't even know if people are going to listen to it or buy it. Like, why am I choosing to do this as my job if I'm constantly doubting myself and if I'm constantly afraid of giving my art, which is so intimate and precious to me, to a room full of strangers who may or may not listen? So starting that conversation and inviting musicians to come to this thing and having them say, yeah, I feel the same way and I know what you mean and this is how I've dealt with it. And it started slow, but I mean, we've been doing it for over a year now and we're getting anywhere from, 8 to 20 people to attend our meetups. And I look forward to them every month and we host it and we talk for 2 hours. We don't promote shows. We don't do any of that. It's like, leave all that at the door.
How does the format work? Do you come with sort of like a topic of conversation in mind, or is it really just sort of steered by people in the room with things to talk about?
I think at the beginning, we definitely had like a structured... Hosting the meetup was giving me anxiety a little bit because it was like, well, what am I going to do? Like, what are we going to talk about? And then is anyone going to show up? Mm-hmm. And dealing with all of these factors that are outside of your reach. But Angela and I would like go through and prepare like talking points so that like if there was a lull in conversation, we'd be like, okay, cool, we can grasp onto this and chat about this. But usually we would talk about like, all right, everybody close your eyes. Now raise your hand if you've ever been anxious, if you suffer from anxiety. Now open your eyes. And then same with depression. It's like, so yeah, like already right there, you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable, but you're seeing that you're in a room of people who feel the same way. So usually we would like start with a topic of discussion and then it would just go. Mm-hmm. So we kind of found out that letting it happen more organically is like the way that it's supposed to go. Yeah. After introductions, we asked people like, what are they expecting to get from the group? Like, what are they hoping to learn or like grasp so that they can continue on their daily living lives, you know? And usually if we hear like the same answer multiple times going around the room, then that's what we're going to address. And then that's kind of what we talk about. But honestly, like you share one thing and then it just opens up. And those 2 hours go by so fast. It's wonderful. It's so great.
Yeah, I can totally imagine that. I mean, I think that those kind of connections and conversations that I've just had with my innermost circle of friends who I allow to like see beyond the facade of like, yeah, I'm here to show up and put on this show for you, mm-hmm. Speaking about the frustrations and and about just all of the anxiety that comes along with putting so much of your self-worth into something that is totally lacking any kind of guarantee or formula for success. Right. Or, you know, it's definitely, it's a tough job.
Yeah. And I think that we're kind of masochists because we know that going into it. You know what I mean? It's like no surprise. But I mean, I have to play music. It's what I have to do. I love being on stage and performing in front of people. Like I've never felt more comfortable than being in a room with my friends, like the people that I love the most, and make music with them and then get to go on stage and perform that in front of people. It's the best feeling in the world. But there's also times that you constantly question yourself and you are revealing so much of yourself in the music that you're writing, and then you're just playing in front of a bunch of strangers who might not be listening to it or might like leave to go to the bar, and you're like, well, wait, do they not like it? Like, did I do something? You know, it's this constant thing that travels in your head of this self-talk, this like these gremlins just like growling at you in your own head, and it's constant. And so it's definitely worth starting the conversation, I think.
I think so too.
Yeah,
for sure. Have you, like, since you started the meetup, I've been doing a little bit of research, but I know that there are some other organizations or entities kind of throughout the country who are at least sort of beginning this dialogue. Mm-hmm. It seems to have been a conversation that has started recently. Mm-hmm. I know hearing about your meetup in Denver was the first thing that I'd heard about in our region that was specifically a conversation amongst musicians mm-hmm. to talk about mental wellness. Do you feel like just beginning this dialogue and just having this conversation has kind of allowed some clarity in your own head?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard to talk about. Mm-hmm. I think that, especially in the music industry, it's a very masculine industry. Like, you're supposed to be, like, not talk about your feelings, and like if you do, then people will kind of look down on you or make you feel a specific way, you know. And so it's a hard thing to just open up and talk about. And I talk about this often with members who come to the meetup and just my friends and people in the music community of like, it's not easy to say like, hey, I'm kind of jacked up. But what's the alternative? You know, for me, it was just like packaging it up into like really tight packages inside and then pushing it away or reserving it. And I mean, that's a recipe for trouble, you know, that's a recipe for disaster. I think that because we're a band at the kind of the level that we're at right now, and the fact that we're able to outwardly say like, hey, I'm Spencer from the Hollow and I suffer from anxiety and, you know, minor depression, and I'd like to talk to you about that. I think that even if people aren't participating in the conversation, they're aware of the conversation. And that makes them feel like they're not alone. So again, it takes massive amounts of vulnerability, and like there's a lot of strength in that. But also, I think in doing so, you can start to pinpoint what the problems are and meet with a community of people who are looking to work through things themselves while also helping you. Like that's the aspect of community and trying to build that community that I think is missing certainly in the Denver scene. I think the music scene in Denver is very interesting. It's kind of like Mean Girls. There's like a lot of cliques. It's like high school cliques, right? So like you have people who will go see the same 4 or 5 bands and like that's their thing. And people are vying to like, hey, come to my show, buy my stuff. And then it's like, okay, well, you should come to my show. And then they never do. And it's like, okay, so what is your idea of community? You know, what is your idea of the scene? My idea in an ideal world would be that everybody goes to everybody's shows. And then even when the amps aren't plugged in and the microphones aren't turned on, we're still meeting with each other and we're still hanging out with each other and playing Dungeons and Dragons with each other. You know, like I want to be friends with people outside of the scene, which is part of the reason why I come up to Fort Collins when I can, when we're not playing shows, is to build that scene, to build that community and say like, hey, things are hard. So let's like work on that together so that we can like be those people, that foundational like community group that people can count on and rely on.
Totally.
So that's what I'm hoping for.
I think having those people in your life who can sympathize with a lot of where you're coming from, but then, extending those friendships beyond sort of business mode
Right.
is pretty key.
Right.
One of my favorite podcasts that I was ever a part of was with the 3 members of the Native Stranger Artist Worker Collective. Those artists are Ellie Perry, who's a musician, singer-songwriter, Corey Marshall Spangler, who's a writer, and Rooster, Pappy Longlegs, who's a master banjo builder, luthier, performer. And they had unified and developed a statement about sort of what they stood for. They were being really intentional about the art that they made, the way that they made it, the way that they established their roots in the community, the way that they lived their lives in order to make the kind of sacrifices they needed to make their art, but also really keeping relationships in the forefront and keeping their own mental health taken care of. And this was like, for me, having this conversation was like a light bulb literally illuminating above my head. Because we operate so often in conditions of total scarcity where it's like you need to exhaust all of your resources because you love this thing and you have to keep making it. And you have to take these opportunities because what if there's not another opportunity? And, even if that doesn't mean necessarily like you're filling the tank of what you need.
Right.
I think being an artist is, your desire to create art and make art definitely supersedes any notion of your own self-care or direction and what you need. And
Absolutely.
And so that to me was my first conversation about this. It's like, well, you're not just gonna like starve yourself and push yourself to the point of having this opportunity, because really once you get there, what do you have?
Right. I think it's so interesting too that it's kind of like the industry is already like preset. There's like you're supposed to follow a very specific path in order to like be a successful musician. First of all, the idea of there being one final outcome of being a successful musician looks like is bonkers to me. It's like some people are like, there are hobbyist musicians. There are people who love to play music, but like go and play open mics, or like will play probably out 4 times a year or something like that, just because they love to play. That there's musicians like what we're trying to do in the Hollow is like, we want to be musical entrepreneurs. We want the band to be our job. We want to be successful in the sense that we can make enough money to sustain a healthy lifestyle from writing and performing music. So there are endless, I suppose, like end goals for what a successful musician looks like. There's no wrong answer, right? But if you're trying to become a musical entrepreneur, there are like specific stepping stones that are already set for you that you're supposed, like that is the trail you're supposed to take in order to be whatever. And that is just kind of outrageous to me, because in that, you have to sacrifice everything that you've ever loved. You have to work a job that you're not happy with, but it pays you money so that you can just return all of that money back into your project. It just blows my mind, the amount of sacrifice, which then will like turn into where the mental unwellness comes from, right? You're like, I just gave up all of this stuff and I'm writing this music, but I'm not getting any, like I'm not going to be able to sustain a healthy lifestyle if I keep doing this. And so I realized in our band, we've been together for about 4 years. This iteration has been together for just about a year, but our drummer Jason has been in the band for 2 years. Jonathan has been in the band since its inception. And I think that the reason that we work so well together is because we constantly tell each other how much we appreciate each other. In the practice space, after shows, the first thing we do is give each other hugs and say, great show, I appreciate you, thanks for being here and doing this with me. And just that little thing, showing that appreciation, helps with like communication within the band so much. Like it's so little, but people just assume that you appreciate them. So you don't really need to say it because they're like, oh yeah, you already know I appreciate you, so don't worry about it. But just hearing it like makes such a big impact. And so like there's little things that you can do that kind of set you apart from the path. And I think that like maintaining that mental, like that healthy mental balance, that wellness is so vital. And not only just in the music scene, but like in your everyday life. It's like, man, we could treat each other so much better and live with a healthy mental wellness, like live in a healthy mental wellness state and still pursue music and not have it be as torturous as like what has been kind of laid in front of us as like the path to follow, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's really interesting with people saying like, yeah, I think I'm going to put my mental wellness first. It's like, yeah, it makes sense, but not everybody does it, you know? So I think it goes back to that idea of like, well, we just assumed that we were taking care of ourselves, but we're really not. So now what can we practice and what can we like help teach others so that you can be happy and mentally well while still pursuing your passion of music, you know?
Totally. And having a group of people to sort of be accountable to and have them sort of be checking in with you occasionally, you know, about whether or not you're eating healthy, you're keeping up, are you getting enough sleep? Yeah. Like, have you gotten any exercise in the last month besides your like your stage rock moves?
I'm telling you, yeah.
I mean, I think that stuff's so important. And I do think that there's something to be said too. You talked about appreciation and really staying tied to gratitude. I mean, I think, you know, something that I constantly remind myself is how lucky I am to get to play music every time that I get to play music, whether it's, you know, like strumming some guitar for my niece or I'm playing in front of a big crowd of people. It's like, it's something that I feel really fortunate to have the opportunity to do. But when I get into my own world, and that often has to do with isolation and, you know, really struggling with what's not happening for me on a career level, what needs are not being met by this career alone, then I isolate and I'm not communicating with other people that keep me really in tune with what is beautiful about this journey. And I loved what you said about appreciation. I think that's hand in hand with gratitude.
Totally. I think for us, it's genuine. I think that there is not everyone does this, but I think it's very easy to fall into this notion where you have to like put on like this kind of persona, right? Oh, yeah. And so in doing so, and for so long, being a rock star was like, you just had to be like pretentious, you know, you had to be an asshole. And it was like, to me, I just don't get it. I think that like, and that's fine. Like some people can do that and pull it off and be incredible artists and musicians and people will still buy tickets to their show. Then like, great. For me, it's like, I'm trying to connect with people and share stories on like the most genuine and authentic level that I can possibly do. I feel like everything that I commit to, I go into it with like 100% of energy and focus. And I cannot do that if I'm not at my most authentic and my most genuine. And I think that coming up here to be on the podcast and to chat with friends about potential opportunities is like, it's my favorite thing. It gets me so energized, but it's because I'm having these conversations with people who are like equally energized. And like, right. I love the energy in this room right now because like just you sharing your stories with me about that, like isolated, feeling like very scared almost when you're by yourself thinking of all of these outcomes or like these what ifs or, you know, I expected that I'd be here, but now I'm not. And so now I'm just going to kind of shut in. It's like, yes. I know what you mean. Not exactly because obviously our paths are different, but like you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable in order to start those conversations. And I think that we can all help each other out if we're able to be vulnerable and be genuine and authentically want each other to succeed and to help each other move forward. And so I think in that gratitude and appreciation, like that's foundational stuff. It's where it starts.
I think it's such an interesting thing. So we've talked about the fact that obviously in any scenario, in any profession, at any point in your life, it's difficult to be vulnerable and to admit struggle. But I think, you know, with like the media and this sort of perpetuation of the rock star image, and I think, you know, for one thing, I think you have to, or at least I was under the impression for a long time that you have to present this front of sort of being unaffected. Mm-hmm. And that, you know, like substance abuse and that this lifestyle is part of the package. Mm-hmm. But I do think that more artists are speaking out really candidly about their own struggles. I don't know if you've read Jeff Tweedy's autobiography that just came out. Mm-mm. It was so great. It's called Let's Go So We Can Get Back. And he talks about basically his whole life in music, but really addresses a lot of his own insecurity and, you know, makes the point that the more his favorite artists feel like actual human beings, actual accessible human beings to him, the closer he feels to his whole process and the whole world of art for him. And so I do think that it's really bold and awesome that more and more artists are speaking out about their actual struggles. Right.
I think it just makes them, it just humanizes them, right? And mm-hmm. I like going back to what you were saying of just, you would kind of have to put on this front and be like, all right, are the cameras off? Are the microphones off? Okay, now I can finally be myself. And I'm like, there was almost like this perception of accessibility. Like if you're like a person in the rock scene, then you can't be as accessible to your fans. Like there needs to be this constant vying, like, oh, I can't wait, instead of allowing yourself to be yourself all the time and giving people that access to make it feel like there's more of a connection. There's no longer this like performer fan relationship. It's like, no, we're all humans at this place right now. We're up here doing this thing for you. And then afterwards we can just hang out and be together. Like that perception and that persona and that kind of stereotype has really like kind of muddled the water a little bit. And I think for us, there's always ego in performing, I think. Like people who love to be up on stage in front of people and like singing like, look at me, like I'm so pretty, you know? But like, again, I think that the content that we're writing too, we're very focused on what we're writing about and just like socially and critically conscious material. And we're very specific about the language that we use when we're writing. If it's love songs, we make them gender neutral. And I think that like these little things that go kind of unnoticed will eventually make like a really big impact in a community that needs a little bit of change, a little bit of restructuring. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea of that accessibility. Like, let's bring the fans, let's like not have to put up these barriers, these constant like.
Yeah, I can relate with the opposite side of that, and not saying that I want to create this distance that, you know, like that I'm ever a different human, but sure. I've always felt way more comfortable on stage than in person, because for me, like, I can present this persona, I can create this distance. People are physically removed from where I'm at. Right. So I have this space and this platform to be whomever I want to be without, you know, fear of, like, to me, that as a performer feels a lot less vulnerable than sitting across from you at a table and being like, yeah, I've had really bad depression. Yeah. You know, or like I've struggled with substance abuse to sort of deal with the fear that comes with being a performer.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. It's almost like a cape, right? It's like that's the superhero part, is when you get to go on stage and you're just like, okay, now you're there and I'm up here and I'm going to do my thing. Totally. And I totally feel that same way. And I think that like I've gotten to the point where I can't be in front of house before shows. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My social anxiety has gone through the roof, thinking about like the people who come to our shows to see us. And when I'm talking to people, I want to have these conversations with them. Mm-hmm. I want to sit down and give them all of my attention, and I want to like, how was your week? But then when you have, 80 people in the room who are there to see you, you're like, okay, hold on. Okay, now it's okay. Hold on. I'm so sorry. And then that is so overwhelming to me that I'm like, I just have to hide in the green room. from now until forever. And then after shows, it's like, oh, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go home and go to bed because I am so exhausted from the social anxiety.
Seriously, I think that's such a real thing.
Yeah.
And I didn't, if it weren't for conversations that I'd had with other musicians, I'm not totally sure that I could have like made it out of like this particular period of time in my life where, I felt so depleted. And a big part of that was like this constant feeling of obligation to everyone and everything, and always having to kind of present myself in this manner that just overextended. Like the tank of my energy was so far drained. And it took one person being like, you can take a step back and you do not have to do that. And you need to take care of yourself. Like, when was the last time you did anything to take
self-care,
care of
right?
yourself?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't even know. I have no idea what that looks like or feels like, And
then it's like a relevance thing. You're like, well, if I take any time off, then people are going to forget who I am. And
seriously.
And it's like, oh my gosh. And when you're so obsessed with the outcome of why you're writing music instead of what you're writing music for,
yes,
that's when it becomes a problem. And so like The Hollow just took a break from October 13th to this last Saturday. Like, we'd played no shows. We like hung out and it was great, but we practiced like 5 times. I mean, we came up here for our band retreat and that was wonderful. That was the first time that we had played with each other since October. So it was just like, it was so necessary for us to take that time because we had worked so hard. And it was like, all right, everyone go do their own thing. Like, let's hit the reset button. And then when we come back, we're going to hit it hard and it's going to be fantastic. But when you start losing sight of like, when that energy starts driving, that's when the flashers are going off and you're like, okay, this doesn't feel right. Like, I'm way too upset doing something that normally makes me happy, and it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when you're driven by, I think so much of the decisions that you make when you're doing music, and I was going to sort of delineate separately for when you're trying to do a more entrepreneurial style of music, but I don't even think that applies. I think there's so much fear at the base of a lot of decisions that you make around playing music.
Yeah.
And that can lead to such unhealthy situations with people you really care about collaborating with and you care about making with, and all of the relationships you try to have in your life. And when I was kind of coming out of this really dark period, I had a mentor who was like, yeah, your priorities at this point, your priorities are totally going to realign. And ultimately you have to decide how they stack up. But your music's going to be like down there. And then, I also took a big break. I took a big step back. And the more energy that I kind of put into my own self-care, the more I felt like this creative energy start to rejuvenate in my life. And I was like, man, this is what I love. Like, this is what I love about myself, is this energy and desire to like make and create. And it's back and I can feel it. And it's not just like, shit, I have to I got to book this tour. I got to get out there. We got to release this album. How am I going to get money to release this album and then promote it? And all of these, just fear perpetuating string of decisions that we keep making,
Well, I mean, I'm so happy that you were able to hit that reset button. It's like such a necessary thing. And then be able to like bounce back how you have, because I mean, I was at your show at Washington's and like there was a lot of people there. So like whatever you did, I think it's working. You know what I mean? I think it's, I had to take a massive step back and say like, okay, in the grand scheme of things, I would be so worried about, okay, are people going to come to my show? And then people would come to the show. And my expectation was that we're going to sell out because we always sell out because we're so good. And that's never the case. It's never the case. But like the idea is like, okay, well, we're going to sell this many tickets. This is what it's going to look like. Facebook said this many people are going to come. So obviously everyone who RSVP'd is going to be there because they wouldn't say, yeah, I'm going if they weren't. Anyway. And so then the event happens and not as many people as you were expecting showed up. And that's where I would get crushed. I'd be like, man, we really embarrassed ourselves. Like, this is such a bad move. I had to take a step back and say, okay, so first of all, that is so disrespectful to the people who came to be like, oh, well, not that many people showed up, so like, whatever. There's still that many people who bought tickets to come and see you. So like, do it and do it right. But then like, just saying like, okay, then what's next? Like, what's the next thing? And like, I would let that like cripple me. I would be like so devastated by that I'd be like, no, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to do this right now. Instead of like, okay, so that just happened. What do we got next? Like forward thinking and always just keeping your attitude positive and being able to eliminate expectation. Be like, okay, so this sounds like it would be like a really cool idea. So let's try to do that. See what happens with it. Take that information that we gathered and try something else or try that same thing again and see what works. It's like, it's too exhausting to live in that space where you're constantly angry at yourself for trying to do something that you really love to do. It's like, if you're constantly disappointing yourself, then why are you actually doing this, you know? And so I'm trying every day to say like, all right, in the grand scheme of things, like this is Denver, Colorado. This is Fort Collins, Colorado. And this many people in this city, in this state, in this country. It's like when you just make it bigger and bigger and bigger, you're like, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, okay, not a lot of people showed up. Well, there's a lot of people who still don't know who you are. There's also people who are here who love you and appreciate you and love your music so much that they spent $12 on a ticket and bought some merch and blah, blah, blah. It's like, then focus on that, man. Like it's really easy.
And you get to be a rock star, Spencer.
It's so much fun.
Like it's an awesome thing. Yeah, I do think I want to talk more about the meetup and specifically about, it's something that is obviously near and dear to your heart, which is creating a community of musicians who are open about the struggles that they're experiencing in hopes that that dialogue will sort of lead people to a place where they can maybe reprioritize things in their lives, maybe live with more gratitude, more appreciation for the people that they're working with, and create goals for themselves that align with maintaining their own mental wellness.
That's it, 100%.
And I love that. And I wonder, I know that you are in the process of working on starting a meetup in Fort Collins. And I'd love to talk more about that because I want to go.
Sweet. Well, you're invited.
All right.
we just locked in a date with Hunter over at Alley Cat.
Cool.
Sunday, March 24th from 3 to 5 p.m. We're going to be in that little front patio space that they have up there. And I'm so excited about that. We hosted our first meetup in February's first Friday. There was a big mental wellness event that they hosted at the downtown artery. And our friends Sarah and Evan from Videos That Matter hosted their first Friday event there, and it was specifically about mental wellness. So they asked us to be a part of it because we had been chatting with them for a few months about trying to throw something together. They wanted us to kind of do something during the event, but first Fridays at the artery, there's a lot going on. Yeah. And so what we did is we said, well, what if we did like a brunch situation the day following? So we stayed up for the event. We enjoyed the event. We went home, slept, had some brunch, and then hosted our meetup at the artery. And there was like 8 people that came out, and we didn't really promote it that well because we didn't really know how to. I mean, we did like the Facebook thing, but also our meetup isn't on Facebook because social media causes so much anxiety for people, so it seems kind of ironic and counterintuitive to post something on there constantly.
Right.
But for me, it was very important to say, like, if we're going to introduce the Mental Wellness Meetup in Fort Collins, then we're going to have to show some consistency. And like, for the people that did show up, the 8 of us that showed up on that Saturday, I want to give them a safe space monthly where they can come in and chat again. We've been doing this for a year down in Denver, and we've been helping so many people for a year now. And again, like those numbers, attendance is anywhere from 8 to 20 people monthly. And that's like, for us to be able to have those conversations. And now those people are like exchanging contact information with each other because they're tethered to the group, but now they're tethered to like helping each other. And when we're talking about growth and community, that's exactly what we're talking about. So introducing it up here and getting the ball rolling, we're going to continue to do this and show the necessity for the support group and for like more resources and assets. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see that develop. I think there's, definitely, I think there are points at which maybe you need more than a meetup group. And, we're definitely working on our end, at least at being able to direct people immediately to those resources when they need them. But I do think that there is this mental wellness maintenance. We tend to be a culture that sort of veers away from preventative care, and kind of on the end of more easy solutions. But I think there's something so valid in showing up, having conversations, and maybe you're not necessarily the person in the room with the greatest need that day, and you can be a strong support for other musicians who are going down a rocky road and experiencing some of this.
Yeah.
I know that some of my first conversations surrounding mental wellness were some of the first times anyone had talked to me about self-care, about self-worth, and about how to like be in tune with that and take care of that. So I think it's amazing what you get from showing up for other people, and you never know when somebody's really going to touch you or someone's going to inspire you. And
I think that's critical too. I think just the awareness of it. For me, I'm certain I was dealing with a ton of anxiety and depression before I had the awareness and the vulnerability to outreach the group on Facebook. So just because I wasn't aware of it doesn't mean that it wasn't happening. You know what I mean? And so honestly, just starting the conversation is a light bulb to a lot of people of like, oh man, so maybe I've been feeling like this for a really long time. And again, going back to the industry, we're paid in drink tickets, so we're essentially we're kind of paid to cope with this. Like, again, we're kind of funneled towards like, okay, well, you should deal with it like this. And for me, it's like, well, what about those sober acts? Like, do their drink tickets get like refunded? Does that go to their payout?
You can really make some friends happy with your drink tickets. I have learned.
Well, I've been trying to donate my drink tickets to bar staff. So like, oh,
that's cool.
So like, if I'm not drinking, it's like, hey, so if we're not tipping you on top of these tickets, then you can just use my tickets, whatever, how much it would cost, like $3, I guess, a ticket for PBR or whatever. But so yeah, there's like that aspect, but I honestly think that it's awareness, and people just, it's not that people are ignoring it. They're aware of it, but they're like, no, I don't want to deal with it. That could certainly be the case, but I think more times than not, it's people who are just completely unaware. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I'm just not going to talk to anybody, I'm just going to shut down for a little bit until it goes away, and then whatever. But then having the awareness and saying like, okay, I know this is happening to me. Why is this happening? What can I do to work myself through this? And then what can I do to make sure this doesn't happen anymore? And I think that just us providing the space and allowing the conversation to happen where people are just saying like, hey, this is what happened to me the other day and I don't know why, so maybe you guys can help me out. And it's just the best. It really is. I mean,
totally.
We get people who will just sit and they won't participate in any conversations. And of course, my anxiety bell starts to ring because I'm like, are they getting what they need out of, like, they're not talking, so like, did we offend them or something? And then it turns out that just being in the room was more than enough for them. And they're grateful for us providing the space and the time for them to just come in and be in a group of people who are dealing with some of the same issues that they are. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Absolutely. So you have the awareness and you get to have those conversations sort of surrounding, to give definition to sort of what you're experiencing. And you also get to have conversations about what it's like to be a musician in an industry that sort of reinforces this dialogue of like, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. And maybe you don't have to do all those things. No. I mean, I feel like one thing that has happened as a result of more musicians coming together in this community and talking about, you know, spending $20,000 on an album that you're not going to make any money off of potentially.
Yeah.
Like, is that the best move for you in this moment?
Right.
Like, and just being able to have conversations about this dialogue that keeps being reinforced by the industry that might not be the formula for anything other than a real mental health mess,
right.
than a crisis. And so I'm really excited. I'm excited to be able to come to the meetup and talk about some of this BS that we sort of internalize.
Absolutely.
And just the ways that, you know, all of that fear and anxiety and depression sort of infiltrate other elements of our life. And I really do think that as musicians, we should get to live really happy, fulfilled lives.
100%. And I think that something that we talk about often is in the meetup too, is like when you kind of remove yourself from the scene and you're like, okay, now I'm anxious and depressed and it doesn't have to do with the music scene. Then it's like, what are things that you can do to better yourself? And it's like, for me, I've taken 3 weeks off of drinking so far. Like February 16th, I was at a party and I was like, I literally laid in bed and said, I don't want to feel like this anymore. Like, it was so bad.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, cool. So I'm going to just try to do this and like live a healthier lifestyle for me and see what that looks like and feels like. And like walking outside when the sun is out, like we were just talking about how beautiful, and living in a state where you have 300 days of sunshine, you can do a lot of walking. And then like yoga and meditation and like simple, you can set up routines just like to better your like mental fortitude. And in doing so, I've just felt so much better with myself, with how I'm able to conduct the band as a business, like just more professionally. There's so many different tips and tricks of just leading a better, like diet is such a big deal, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And being in the music industry, when you're on tour, you're driving around in a van and eating KFC like every day. And it's
That's
like,
right.
if you don't know how to communicate with your band members, now you're just like upset, you're pissed at everybody, and now you've got 20 more shows to play. It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There's different ways that you can just better yourselves by simple communication and just taking care of yourself. You know what I mean?
Totally. My key, I say these 3 words to myself all the time that are just reduce emotional vulnerability. And like, you know, you do that by self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. It's amazing how much better you're able to deal with the world when you're not hungover and or like fiending for a drink just to get through that anxiety moment. When you haven't been eating trash food, sleeping on floors and making no money.
Right.
And been in way too close quarters with your 3 best friends who you now hate.
Right.
So
it's a real thing. I mean, the case studies are there to prove that it's a real thing. And so it's like, there's ways that you can work around it. And I think healthy communication is certainly at the top of the list. And this is by no means saying like, if you're at shows and you're drinking and like that's how you do your thing, then do your thing. Like, I know people who have social anxiety so badly that like getting on stage in front of people is like crippling to them. So to have like a whiskey drink before they take the stage actually calms the nerves. Awesome. Like I'm saying like, this is a brand new thing that is working for me. And just like you said, that it feels so much better. And I think I'm able to pay more attention and more focus to running this thing as a business, you know? And Dr. Brené Brown has a book called Daring Greatly about vulnerability.
I love it.
And it's a game changer.
Can we just give a shout out to Brené Brown right now?
Yeah,
I really loved Braving the Wilderness,
Oh my
The
gosh.
Gifts of Imperfection. I've pretty much read them all.
Daring to Lead is like one that's on my read list right now. So it's like, yeah, she's kind of a badass.
And
so.
what I think is so amazing about all of her books and really about the meetup and about this conversation is like, in life you get a lot of like steps and tools for X desired result. Like if you do this, 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 and this, and this, and this, then that'll push you closer to this finish line result. But I think the thing that is not addressed and not discussed is like, first and foremost, how is your emotional composition? How are you at dealing with and processing emotion? How are you at communicating boundaries? How are you at, like, you know, all of these things that are so fundamental in being okay in life? Those were conversations I didn't have growing up. Those were conversations I damn sure didn't have before I jumped into the music business. And I love the fact that you're really starting to facilitate those conversations. You've been doing it for over a year in Denver, and you're bringing it to Fort Collins.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited to see the results. I have this theory that I'm going to be working on over the next few weeks in these conversations, that a really healthy community of musicians is going to make better art.
Absolutely.
And I think a community that gets behind supporting the health of their artists will reap the benefits of great art. And so we'll see how that goes.
I'm so excited about it.
But really grateful for everything that you're doing and the conversations that you're starting and you're prompting here. Well, thank you again, Spencer. I really appreciate this conversation, and thanks for making the time. Thank you for tuning in to this conversation at the Help Desk. I've included links to everything that Spencer and I chatted about, and I would encourage you to attend the next Fort Collins Musicians Mental Wellness Meetup. It'll be taking place on Saturday of FOCO MX. That's April 27th, 2019, from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. at the Art Lab. For more information about the Music District, you can find us online at www.themusicdistrict.org or visit us in person at 639 College Avenue, right in the heart of Fort Collins, Colorado. That's it for me, your host Alicia. Take care of yourselves. For real.